Hello there and welcome. This is Gina from McGuire. I am glad you're here and Happy New Year. I apologize for not having videos lately. I was traveling, then I was very sick, and then I was traveling again, but now I'm back. And today I'm sharing with you 3 card ideas that include a keepsake. So this is a keepsake that's removable, that the recipient can hang up and think of you all the time. And I'm sharing 3 different ways to incorporate them into cards. Now, these happen to be love or friendship themed cards. However, keep in mind you definitely could do these techniques with a variety of dies and products that you already have on hand. Now, let's go ahead and look at the first card completed so you can see how the keepsake comes off of the card, and then I'll show you how I create it. So this is that first card. You can see the 2 hearts that freely move on the front of the card hanging from the top. And when you open this up, there are 2 pieces of tape that hold that string there. And so the recipient can remove those pieces of tape and then hang this over, something on, so that it can be on display. So I have stuff like this hanging on my bulletin board and on small knobs in my craft room. So it's just a really fun little keepsake. And again, you could do this with a variety of products you have on hand. Since I hadn't crafted in a while, I knew I would have a hard time getting started, and choosing color combos is usually one of the hardest steps for me. So I used my color cube and I chose a color combo to kind of get me going for all of my cards today. So this is a color cube. It's filled with different cards with color combinations. There are actually 2 different cubes. I've used these in videos before and I don't always show them, but I do use them often to get me started. So I chose these colors of cardstock here. These are mostly from Tailored Expressions and Gina Designs. I also chose to use the new Pretty Pink Posh Build-A-Heart die set. If you've watched my videos, you know I really like die sets like this that you can kind of layer up in different ways. There are 4 different size hearts with faux stitching details, and then lots of little pieces that you can layer onto it in different ways. I really like this kind of thing because you can change up the look each time and create colorful layered pieces. I'm starting out with 2 of the largest heart cut from white cardstock. And then I've also cut a bunch of the different dies from the different colors of cardstock that I showed you earlier. By the way, I did add in Concord and Ninth Wildberry there to the mix. You can see I have all my die cut pieces and my Spellbinders craft stacks up there at the top of the screen to keep everything organized. What I'm doing here is cutting pieces to do different colors on the background of this heart. So you can see I'm creating 2 hearts at once. One of them starts with like the peach color at the top and will go to the purple at the bottom. The other will start with the purple at the top and the peach at the bottom. By the way, these 2 hearts will get glued back to back. Now, you could have just done a solid colored heart and then add all the pieces that the die set creates and just layer them on, following the directions on the website. But by cutting these additional pieces for the background, I'm adding more color onto these elements. So I am stepping them up a little bit, but you definitely could keep it simple and follow along with the instructions on the website on how these layer. It's pretty easy to figure out. Now it's time to add those layers that the die set creates, and those little die cut pieces will cover up those white gaps. So I'm kind of doing a blend of color from purple to peach with pink in the middle, but you got this color combination from that color cube card, and it was a great way to get a kickstart with my creating today. So I'm just adding these in, and I'm offsetting some of the pieces so you can see more of the faux stitching on the heart background, and look at what we end up with in the end. I love the look of this, and these will get glued back to back. Normally I would add little gemstones to this for a bit of sparkle, but I didn't want to add too much bulk today. You definitely could if you wanted to, but instead I chose to cut very thin strips of silver glitter paper, and I'm just gluing them in 3 different areas along each of these hearts. So I put a thin line of glue, lay the glitter cardstock strip into it, and then when it's dry, I will trim the excess off the end. This is a great way to add a little bit of sparkle without much bulk. You could also spray these with like a glitter spray or even add a glitter paste to them if you prefer. On one of these hearts, I'll put a sentiment, but on the other, I wanted a row of hearts. And I wanted a longer row of hearts. So I took this die that cuts 4 of them, and I cut it from the edge of white cardstock, as you can see here. Then I shifted it over, overlapping one of the hearts, and die cut it again. And you can keep going to create a border of hearts. However, this piece is long enough for me, so I'll go ahead and trim it down. And this white piece here is actually just a guide for me to place my hearts evenly spaced and make sure I get them straight. It just makes it a lot easier. I'll place this over one of my hearts right in that large area in the center, and I'll tape that guide in place, or I guess I could call it a template. Into each of those openings, I will glue a heart. I'm starting with a wild berry heart. It's the same color as what you see through the heart openings there. And then I will put a silver glitter heart on top. Now, another thing I could have done is use that heart die to cut from that wild berry piece before I glued it to the heart, and that way you could see through it. But I thought the little added dimension of this would be helpful. And by the way, my head gets in the way a lot in this video. I apologize for that. I guess I'm just getting back into the swing of things and kind of forgot about it. All right, so I put a magnet on top of it while it dried, and then I can carefully remove that template and save it for later on. And now I have those dimensional hearts added evenly and spaced nicely. All right, now the other big heart, I'm keeping that area open in the center as I plan to add a sentiment. And off screen, I will create 2 smaller hearts in a similar way. By the way, here are some that I created when I was just playing around. These I just used a solid heart background and then glued the details onto it. And you can see how cute those look as is. So there's many ways you could use this die set. All right, so now I have all of my hearts completed. I'm going back to that first large heart where I didn't add the little hearts on top, and I'll add a sentiment here. I'm using an older stamp set here. This is Pretty Pink Posh, All My Love. There's a sentiment in here that says, "You are loved," and I think that is such an encouraging sentiment that I wanted to use this on a keepsake that someone could hang and look at often. At this point in the video, I lost the "You Are Loved" sentiment. You can see I'm looking for it, but I did end up finding it. I have my heart in the corner of my Misty stamping tool on the waffle flower grip mat so that it won't move as I stamp. I'm placing that sentiment right in that large area in the center using my anti-static powder tool, and then I'll add white embossing powder and heat set it. You could do a die cut sentiment here or a larger sentiment if you wanted to, but there's something really nice about that little sentiment on that large heart in that bright white embossing. So here are the 4 hearts that I ended up with, 2 of each size. I'll set these aside for now, and now let's work on the background of the card. I'm using the Pretty Pink Posh XOXO pierced plate die. Now this is a really cool die. You know I'm a big fan of dies like this, but this one is especially cool for a reason I'll show you in a moment, and there are 2 great ways to use it. It does cut an outside edge that is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. My favorite way to use this is to make an impression with it. So I have my Spellbinders Die Cut Machine, and I'm using that flexible mat that comes with most machines that allows you to make an impression or dry emboss with the die. That's the flexible gray mat that you see there facing up towards the camera. I'll put paper on to that flexible mat and then that piercing die. I'm following the sandwich that the instructions share for making impression or dry embossing with the die. So instead of piercing holes, this will press a detail into our cardstock, and it gives this fun pillowy look. You could use either side of this. Now the other way you could use this die is just as if it were a regular die. Just run it through your die cut machine like you would any kind of die, and it creates a pierced pattern. And that's what you see over on the left. So over on the left is the background I created using that background die as a regular die. The background that you see on the right is the one that I created using that embossing trick that I just showed you with the flexible mat. Either is great, but I'm going to use the embossed one for most of my cards today. I love that the background can be used in both ways and many more. So I glued that background on the right onto a white note card that is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches, and it's side folding. I'm cutting a piece of silver string here, and I'm gluing taping one end to the back of the large heart. Now I put a piece of tape at the top, and then on the bottom I folded it over and put another piece of tape. This just helps to prevent it from loosening over time. And I did the same thing with the other end of the string on the back of the small heart. Now I'm putting lots of liquid adhesive around the ends of those strings and around the back of the heart. And I will take our other hearts and sandwich them on top. So the silver string is sandwiched a lot between those hearts, so I don't have to worry about it coming undone. There are a few different ways you could do this, but this one seemed to work the best. Once I gave that some time to dry, I'm using a paper sanding block to smooth the edges of these hearts. It just gives it a nice smooth look and gives it, I guess, a finished look also. If you wanted to, you could put a coat of diamond glaze or glossy accents over this to give a nice shiny smooth finish to the hearts, but I decided to leave them as is. But using that sanding block on the side does give it a smooth look. Okay, now to add this to the front of our card, I am taking the loop of that string or the middle point of that string and folding it over the top front of our card. And then I'll tape it on the inside to hold it there. Now, I fiddled with this a little bit. You can see here I was trying to hold it with my fingers, but really the best bet is to put the hearts where you want them to hang on the front. So I'm kind of positioning the bigger one lower and the smaller one higher. And then put tape at the string at the top so that the string is kind of going straight up from the center of the heart. So this is just a temporary tape. While that's taped there, I'll flip it over and then I can fold that silver loop or string there down and put some washi tape over this. Now I used silver glitter washi tape that I've had in my stash forever. It's nice because it'll hold it in place, but it's removable for the recipient. So you could use any washi tape here. I'll show you other ways to do this later in this video. I will write a little note here to the recipient to remove that tape so that they can use the keepsake. So I just write a little message in there when I write my personal message on the inside of the card. So I think a card like this is really fun because, normally the card itself is a keepsake that you put on display like on a desk or shelf. However, this is a little unique because you can take those hearts off and easily hook it on the edge of a shelf or on a pantry door or on a bulletin board. So it gives the recipient something else that's fun to look at. I received a little hanging keepsake from one of my viewers many years ago that says "You are loved," and I have it hanging on the light in my bathroom and I look at it every day. And this is something that gives that same kind of feel. So the recipient would just remove the washi tape. You can see it's easy to remove. And then you have the two hearts connected by string that you can just hook over something. So I encourage you to give this a try. You could do any shaped die cuts for this. I do recommend, if you want to make it two-sided, to use a symmetrical die like a heart, star, or circle. Or you could do any shape die and put them on circles and then glue them back to back. All right, let's do another example. Here is the completed card so you know the direction we're headed in. It has a large heart that's hanging on the front that is removable. I made this heart with layers of felt just for something different, but you definitely could make it from cardstock also. So when you want to remove this, it simply comes out of little notches on the top front of the card and you can hang it up on display and even write a personal message on the other side. This is another fun way to create a keepsake on your card. Let's start by creating the heart. I'm using the Pretty Pink Posh Fringe Heart die set. I love this set. There are 4 dies included and it creates a layered fringe heart. Instead of using cardstock, I thought it'd be fun to use felt. I'm using felt from Poshta Designs and it die cuts beautifully. I do add a metal shim in there just to give a little more pressure. Make sure you get a high quality felt like the ones I'm using today to make sure that it die cuts nicely. Now, I thought this felt would be really fun for this fringe heart, but you could use cardstock if you prefer. And by the way, I'm creating 2 at once so I can save one fringe heart for later. Now, the large heart, and that goes on the background, I die cut first from white cardstock, and I'm putting glue all over it. Not a thick amount of glue, but a lot of glue spread out. And then onto that, I'm laying down our felt heart. Then I'll go to the next layer, put glue on the back of that, and place that on top. Notice I'm not putting glue on the fringe area. Now, I did find that I needed to go back and put a little more glue in there later on, but I was kind of experimenting here. So you might have to play around depending on what glue you have, or you may want to purchase a felt glue, which I've gone ahead and done too. Now for the layered heart that I'm adding to this, I'm using an older Pretty Pink Posh set called Winter Foliage. You can see the die set over on the left. It has a lot of beautiful dies included. Well, I am making this Winter Foliage just be a regular flower, something that would be nice for spring. It was at this point that I realized I forgot to add the string to the top of my heart. And since the layers of the felt aren't dry yet, I'm just going to peel them apart, tuck the ends of the string at the top of both sides of the heart with a glob of glue, and then give it time to dry. If you are unsure if these layers will hold, you could instead use double-sided tape, and I'll show you a trick with that later on in this video. So now I'll put something heavy on that, give it quite a bit of time to dry so that that loop is secure. Now we can add our flower and leaves, both created with that Pretty Pink Posh Winter Foliage die set. Now I will go and kind of play around with those little fringe pieces later on and give them a bit of a haircut so you can see the fringe even better. But I love the softness that the felt adds to this keepsake. And I feel like it's more of a keepsake, I guess, because it's made of felt. Now, I could also add some stitching to this, but today I decided not to add any stitching and just use it all glued together. Now off screen, I created a side folding white note card that is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. I also created a panel using that same XOXO piercing background die, but I trimmed the panel down to be a bit smaller. It is 4 by 5 1/4, and I glued it on to the front of the card. Now, sorry, my head gets in the way here. I'm making little pencil marks about an 1 1/4 in from both sides at the top. I will use my scissors to create a little notch just at the top of the note card, right up to the top edge of that XOXO panel. I will do 2 tiny little cuts very, very close together to make that notch a little bit bigger. And then I can hook my string into that. And that is what will hold it onto the front of the card. So the loop is just sticking out on the inside of the card, so the recipient will really know that it is easy to take off from the card. At this point, I decided to give some of my fringe elements a haircut just so you can see them a bit more, but that's optional. I originally was going to stamp a sentiment below the heart, but decided instead to add a Hugs die cut right onto the heart. So I have a piece of white felt and a piece of Altenew double-sided adhesive. I am putting a piece of that double-sided adhesive on the back of the white felt, and then I will die cut it using a Hugs die. By putting the adhesive on the back first, it turns our felt into a sticker, making it really easy to glue together. So I'm just going to place that right on top and press it down. I could have done that with all of the layers on this card. Put the adhesive on the back of the felt, making it into a felt sticker. That really would have saved a lot of time over the liquid glue. All right, I did also add little gemstones to the center of the flower. And I give you a closer look here at that XOXO background and how that string is hooked onto the top of the card with those 2 little notches. When you open it up, you'll see the loop of the string. You can write a note to the recipient that they can remove it, but chances are they'll figure that out on their own. It just carefully removes, and there you have your keepsake, and you can write a personal message on the back of it. I definitely like this option of creating those notches on the front of the card. I think it's easy to do and easy for the recipient to remove. So I'll definitely be doing more of these in the future. All right, now for the third card, and let's look at what the card is like completed. This one has a keepsake on it that is a see-through shaker heart. That is definitely something that is extra special, and I show yet another way to remove that keepsake from the card. In this case, you'd write a note to the recipient to undo this little bow, and when they do so, they're able to remove that keepsake on the front that has a little loop on the top. So this one's really fun. This would be fun for creating Christmas ornaments also, but I like something like this to just put on display. For this one, I'm using the Pretty Pink Posh double heart shaker dies. Now this is really cool because one die creates this double heart with faux stitching. Then there are two dies that you can cut from that, and that will cut the window opening. And I like that there are both options, so you could use them together or separately, or put a color cardstock for the background of your shaker window. You'll see this as we go. So after you die cut using the dies together, you get these double heart frames with faux stitching on them, and I love them. Now I cut, I think 6 or 7 of these from some pink cardstock, and I am gluing together 5 of them. So just using liquid adhesive going all around the edges and gluing the 5 together for a stacked look. Once all 5 are glued together, I'll put something heavy on it while it dries. Next, we need to cut 2 pieces of acetate using the solid double heart. Now to easily cut through acetate, this is what I do. I put the acetate onto the cutting edge of the die, and then I take a piece of scrap cardstock and put that onto the acetate. So basically the acetate is sandwiched between the die and the scrap cardstock. By putting that scrap cardstock on the one side, it helps to push the die through the acetate, and it cuts beautifully every time. So I cut 2 pieces that way. Now on the back of our stacked die cut, I'm putting liquid adhesive, and then I will put the acetate and place that on top, and then I will put something on heavy on it while it dries. I then will take another of the pink frame die cuts, put glue on the front of it, and then place it down onto that acetate. So the acetate is sandwiched between this heart frame and the stacked heart frames. So then we can flip it over and fill in that well using some Pretty Pink Posh clay confetti. Now they have a lot of different little confettis like this that are colorful. Some they have in like Valentine's colors. I just went for a rainbow mix here, but I did take out the blue. I don't know why. I just did the other colors in it. So there's like pink, yellow, purple, green, and white. I then added a few iridescent confetti pieces for a bit of shine too. I could have put more into the shaker window, but this is what I started with. I then put liquid adhesive around the top edge of the pink frame, added on our other piece of acetate, and then our final frame on top of that, and put something heavy on it while it dries for quite a bit of time. And again, I realized at this point, I forgot to put the string on this. This is something I need to make a note of myself when I'm doing these keepsakes, to put the string on it first. So what I did is I used a piercing tool to separate some of the top of the heart so that I could loop the silver around some of those frames at the top of the heart. Now there are other ways you could add this, but this is what worked at the time, and then I just glued the layers back together. So now that silver string is looped at the top of the heart, and I just tied the ends into a knot. So if I was doing this again, I would have put the silver string on some of those layers of hearts before I glued them all together. All right, now off screen I did add a sentiment to this. I used the Pretty Pink Posh Love Script die to cut from black glossy cardstock, and I glued that right onto the front of our acetate shaker. Then below that, I wanted a little sentiment strip that said, "You so much." So I'm using one of my old favorites. This is a Pretty Pink Posh Simple Sentiment Stamps. There's a sentiment in here that says, "Thank you so much." I white heat embossed that on black glossy cardstock, but cut off the word thank so I could team it up with the word love. Now to add this ornament onto the card, I have another little trick for you. I have a side folding white note card that is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, and I again use that XOXO background on a panel that I glued on the front. I'm opening up that card and laying it onto like a craft mat, like a foam mat, and I'll place my heart so it kind of hangs off the bottom edge there. Then right above the top center, I'll pierce a hole using my piercing tool. You could also use a hole punch here, but I just pierced a hole with the piercing tool through the layers on the front of the card. And then I kind of reinforced that hole and made it a little bit bigger with the piercing tool by twisting it around. I then will take another piece of silver string, loop it over, and put the folded end into that hole, pressing it through with my piercing tool. So the loop will come out the front of the card and the ends will stay on the inside. Hoping you can see it in the video here, there's a loop of string right there at the front. I will take the string that's at the top of our keepsake and tuck it through that loop. So you see I just tuck it into the loop and then I will hold my heart where I want it to be hanging on the front. While I hold it there, I'll open up the card and pull the two ends of the string on the inside tight, and that will hold our keepsake on the front. Now on the inside here, I'll just tie a bow as I would like I was tying my shoelaces, and then I can write a little note there that says to the recipient to untie it to remove that keepsake. And now that will hold there nicely. It looks nice, and you got the ends of the string kind of sticking off the top, which I think is fun too. Now this heart will swing around, so you can kind of swing it over to put it into a regular envelope, but I'm going to put mine in an A6 envelope just so there's a little bit of room, but you could use an A2 envelope if you prefer. I like how it kind of hangs off the edge so you can see it see-through right away, and you can easily remove it by undoing that bow. So here you can see I'm undoing the bow. It easily comes undone. Don't double knot it, just do a regular bow, and you can pull the keepsake from the front. I love how this keepsake is a see-through shaker. So it shakes nicely, will look really cool hanging on display, and is just something fun and different to do with your card supplies. Now I was going to make a fourth card using this pretty pink Posh Love Word Shaker die set. This would also work really well for the technique I just showed you. You can see it how you could use these dies together to create an outline frame of the word love and create a shaker element with this. So you would do it in just the same way I did my last example, and I think it'd be really fun too. And you could put a message right there at the center of the heart. All right, so there you have a few different ways to create a keepsake to add to the front of your card, making your card even more special. I hope you'll try some of these using some of the supplies you have on hand. If you're interested in the supplies that I used, I have them linked below in my YouTube description. At the end here, I'll link to a couple other related videos that I'm hoping you find helpful. And again, sorry for the long break. I'm glad to be back, and I hope you have a blessed new year.